Hi everyone. This lesson we're going to make some adjustments to our Photoshop scene. I've actually already gone through and made all of the adjustments already, so instead I'm going to be basically walking you through everything that I've done. So to start out with, let me just kind of go over some of these extra groups that I've added. So before we had the base, then I've added this element adjustment layer. This basically includes any kind of adjustments that I want to do to some of this base geometry. Then on top of that, there's a paint group. This is when, anything else I want to paint into the scene, add in any other textures and things like that, that will go into this layer. Then above that is the background layer, and this has, whatever is in the background. In this case, it's going to be some adjustments to the sky. Sometimes, I might actually put this in the background behind the base, and put this mask on the base layer. But in this case, I find that it works actually better to be on top of things, so that's why it's there. Then above that, there's just a couple other extra things. And then finally, there's an effects group, and this is basically an overall color correction sort of effects that go on top of everything at the very end. So let's take a look at some of these element adjustments first. Actually, before that, if we expand our base group, we have the occlusion. That's always the very first thing I like to work with. So I like to set this to multiply. We can see here by default it comes in like this, and I like to just set this to multiply and then turn the opacity down. You can see what this is doing in here, just giving a little bit more definition to the edges of things. I usually keep this at about 30% or less. I like this at 20. And then you can also see I've added a mask to this here. That's just because it's kind of darkening in some of these strips still. So adding in a mask here will kind of fix that. Okay, so let's take a look at some of these element adjustments. So you can see I've created a group for each one of these things. And basically the way this works, for example, for these curtains, if I want to make a new adjustment for these, I would start out by creating a group. And then if I want to adjust these curtains or select them, we have our mask in here. We just go down here and we want to select these curtains. So instead of using one of these selection tools over here, because this is on a particular channel, all we have to do is go over into the channels and then go into our green channel. If we were just to click on this, we can see it's selecting just these curtains, and we can just hold down Control and click on this, and then we'll get a perfect selection around that. So if we switch back and turn this off and go back down to our group here, and with this selected, we can just click on the mask button, and that'll create a mask for us. And then anything we do inside of this group, if we want to paint something in here, it's only going to affect those curtains. Or if we want to add a adjustment layer, we can do that. Okay, so I'm just going to delete this. And basically I've made one of these for the frames. I have one for the windows, I have one for these palm trees over here, and then the curtains. And then inside of each one of these groups, I've made different adjustments. Usually it's just some brightness adjustments. This one looks like I have some reflection in here for the sky. And the palm trees are a little bit brighter. And the curtains are also a little bit brighter. So that's basically it for these element adjustments. You can see the effect there. And now let's take a look at this paint group. We'll turn this on, and then we'll scroll down here. So I have a whole group here just for the concrete, and again I just use the same selection technique. We can just choose this multi-matte element, go over to the channels, and then we can just hold Control and select this. We'll get a perfect selection around all the concrete. Now if we want to turn this on, there's actually quite a bit of stuff in here. So here we just have a bit of texture overlay onto this edge here. And whenever I can, I like to use smart objects or linked files. That way I can always reposition things, and I don't need to worry about if I scale something down and then I want to scale it up again later. I don't need to worry about losing any information. So for example, this file here is just this concrete texture, and this is just being set to overlay with the opacity turned down a little bit. So I have that. Then for this other stuff over here, we have another texture here, this concrete texture, with a few other adjustments. And that's this whole group is set to soft light. And now because this is being linked in here and we can't actually paint on this, let me just switch this back to the normal so we can see it a little bit better. So it had this shadow in here, and normally we could click on this and we can use the clone tool or something and just paint that out, but we can't do that with this linked layer. So instead what you can do is you can just create a layer on top of it, go to your clone tool, and then let's make sure this is set to current and below, and then if we click in here somewhere, we can actually just paint on top and paint that out. So that's what this extra layer is on top of this. I'll delete that, turn this back on, and turn this adjustment layer back on. Basically, the way I like to work is using non-destructive editing. That basically allows me the most flexibility with things. So I can always make adjustments. I can always go back and change something if the client wants me to, without being locked in or flattening anything. Set this back to soft light. Okay. Then I have some other textures in here on the sides. Let's just turn all these back on. This is on the left side. Back in the back there. And this was a really great image to use here. Basically kind of the same kind of location, and these sides ended up being pretty close to the same perspective, so they work really good for getting these plants growing on the sides. Basically just using that and some adjustments on top of it, so you can see that. Just using this hue saturation adjustment set to colorize. So you can see all of these concrete adjustments. And then a few other overlays on top of the bridge there. And then finally, the grass was looking a little bit thin, so I wanted to paint in a little bit more grass there. And to do that, just find a nice grass image. You can pull that in and just you can just bring it right on top of your grass and then just paint it in. And for that, I just like to use the this default grass brush that comes with Photoshop. Okay, so that's it for this painted stuff. Now in the background layer, this is all of our sky. So basically in here, for this mask here, I've used this multi-matte here. We set this on our light dome. If you didn't use a light dome and you used just a physical sun and sky or something like that, then you probably have an alpha channel, and that would work the same way for this selection. And then inside of here, I just have a few different sky images, and these are just set to different blending modes. We've got this one set to hard light, and I just kind of masked out different areas of that. and these are just layered on top of each other. I find a little bit of desaturation. So I think that looks nice. And these palm trees, I didn't really want them being covered up by the sky, so I just duplicated the base render and then just masked out those two palm trees on the left. So that solves that. And then I just thought I'd add a little bit extra, so I just threw these birds up here. So I like to get a lot of these textures from cgtextures.com. You can just get a free account, and they have a lot of free textures available. So I would suggest going on there and start building up a nice texture library, and you can start overlaying, you know, various textures in here and making the scene a bit more rich. You know, just with all of this that we've done, you can kind of see the difference between just the base render here and then adding in some overlays and textures and adjustment layers. So it's pretty good improvement. In the next lesson, I'll go over this final effects group, and we can make some final color adjustments and things like that.